My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss our rest of season top 150 rankings, how that plays into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, rest of season best ball, and much more. I think that people still want to talk about the Davante Adams trade because there was a lot of fallout right at the beginning, and everybody was freaking out, and now everybody's starting to settle down. Me and Evan talked about it yesterday. I think that my position on the Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams stuff has not really changed, but I want to get other people's takes in here as well. Mark, in our rest of season top 150, we have Davante Adams 30th overall, Garrett Wilson 35th overall. How do you feel about those guys 1v1 versus each other for the rest of the season?
Yeah, we definitely talked about this for quite a while on our team call last night when we're going through the rankings, and kind of came out on Davante being on top here in the Jets wide receiver core, just with his already all chemistry built in with Aaron Rodgers here, and likely to get the goal line opportunities over Garrett Wilson. And these are half PPR ranks, so we think more of the touchdowns are likely to go Davante Adams' way. Garrett Wilson right now currently leads the NFL in targets and has been the wide receiver 9 in half PPR fantasy. So, we think that he'll probably drop down into the wide receiver 2 range for sure. I think there's some potential arguments to be made that Davante could be more of a low end wide receiver 1, in the wide receiver 12 to 14 range. Right now we have him at wide receiver 17. So some chance he could come up there, but I do think if this hamstring injury was real for Davante Adams, he is about to turn 32 here in December. So it's not like a perfectly clean slate of health for him moving forward. And then also some integration potential here in this Jets offense. But the Jets surprisingly have been top 5 pass rate over expectation in the NFL this season. In the first game with Ulbrich as the head coach and Todd Downing as the play caller, they were negative pass rate over expectation by about 3%. So interested to see how that evolves moving forward now with Davante in the offense. And then I do think we can feel good about Aaron Rodgers throwing touchdown passes. Just, that guy maybe has the biggest ego in the league and loves to throw the ball around the end zone. So I do think the touchdown passes will be there for both Davante and Garrett Wilson. It'll just be interesting to see how, Allen Lazard, who's 24th among wide receivers right now in targets, how he gets involved. And then Breece Hall is 2nd among running backs and targets as well coming in. So there's a lot of mouths to feed here. It's a little tricky, but I do think both Davante and Garrett Wilson are, solid wide receiver fantasy options moving forward.
Yeah. So I thought Garrett Wilson was a loser in the trade. Not a big loser, though. And we haven't knocked 7 spots from last week, Garrett Wilson. I think that's about right. I like everybody's reply to my tweet was like, yeah, you idiot, but he's going to get less defensive attention. Yeah, you idiot. The best corner is not going to be on Garrett Wilson anymore. Like, that stuff is so overrated. Losing targets is the worst possible outcome that any wide receiver can have, period. And he's going to lose targets. So I think he's a loser, a small loser, but still a loser. So I like the way that we have this here. And, you can also make a case that Davante Adams is old and maybe not anywhere near the player that he was last time he played with Aaron Rodgers. And maybe Garrett Wilson can just straight up win this and be a higher target share player than Davante. So I like having them real close right now. Again, we have them 30th and 35th. I think that feels roughly right.
I thought it was important on the call that we got Adams grouped in with Jaden Reed, Deebo Samuel, and Nico Collins. That felt most fair.
Yes. Daigle's talking about our rest of season ranks here at the wide receiver position. For those of you watching on YouTube, which I hope that you are, you can see here wherever we have Nico. There we go. Nico, Jaden Reed, 26, Nico, 28, Diggs, 29, Davante, 30 overall in the ranks there. All right. Let's go to the other trade, Daigle. We have Amari Cooper no longer a member of the Browns. Let's start on, let's actually start on the Buffalo side, if you don't mind here. What do you think about Buffalo stuff rest of season? I feel like the sentiment in the market out there right now is this is a smash for Amari Cooper. I'm not saying I disagree, but the sentiment out there in the market is this is an absolute smash for Amari Cooper. Obviously going from Deshaun Watson to Josh Allen is a turbo smash. But yeah, Daigle, what do you think about Bills' fallout from the trade?
Every offseason, we try to learn from our lessons, like Alexander Madison last year, basically copying and pasting that profile into Zamir White this offseason. And Saquon Barkley was one that stood out to me, in that maybe we should just believe what the coaches tell us about how they use players. And on one hand, you have the good public sentiment. You're correct. On the other hand, there's a lot of vitriol about Amari Cooper not looking good in some advanced metrics, the separation metrics, ESPN Open Score, things I don't put any amount of weight in whatsoever. When I think really we should just step back and say, hey guys, Amari Cooper's playing with Josh Allen. Sometimes it is literally that simple. It's not only that, but Keon Coleman has still continued to struggle with his profile to earn targets at the NFL level, is really just very dependent on bombs downfield, has not reached 55 receiving yards in any game. So really, this is a target that Josh Allen and the Buffalo offense quite literally need. So yes, Amari Cooper won't slide in seamlessly like we think Adams will do, understanding Nathaniel Hackett's playbook and has a rapport with Rodgers. But can they get it going quickly? Yes. I think you should be very happy if you have Amari Cooper in fantasy.
Yeah, agreed. I would expect Davante Adams to hit the ground running faster, harder than Amari Cooper. But to me, the big thing on Buffalo is I thought Dalton Kincaid would go out and seize it, right? Before the season, I thought Dalton Kincaid would go out and be a 25, 26, 27% target share kind of guy at the tight end position. Hasn't happened. I thought if he didn't do that, it would be Khalil Shakir going out there and earning a ton of targets at a slot. That hasn't happened either. And so it's just like ripe for the taking in Buffalo for someone to go out there and be the alpha. So I really like that for Amari Cooper. I do not think that they'll change their philosophy. You know, Josh Allen's only averaging 26 pass attempts per game, hasn't topped 30 pass attempts in a game all season. I don't think that's going to change just because they got Amari Cooper, right? So I think it's still going to be a lowish volume passing attack, but certainly really like Amari Cooper. I think it's a small hit to a lot of these guys. Obviously, Keon Coleman gets the biggest hit, but we did dock Shakir down 6 spots here and left Dalton Kincaid roughly the same, which I think is roughly right. Let's go to the Cleveland side of this, Jack. I think that one of the biggest winners will be David Njoku, and I almost made David Njoku my move to make by David Njoku this week, because not only do you remove Amari Cooper, obviously opening up a ton of targets, but how much longer can this Deshaun Watson charade go, right? I mean, at some point, he's going to come down with some type of shoulder injury, quote unquote, so they can just move on, right? They have to. They cannot keep doing this. Or maybe I'm just a donkey, and like I talked about yesterday, they're trying to tank and lose games. But if you put Jameis Winston or DTR in there, you're going to lose plenty of games also. You know, maybe you won't lose every game like with Deshaun, but I don't know, man. But anyways, Jack, what do you think about Brown stuff in the wake of Amari Cooper being gone?
Yeah, I definitely think it's really big for both Njoku and Jerry Jeudy. We discussed on the call last night when we were making these rankings that Njoku could really challenge Travis Kelce and Brock Bowers for the highest target share among any tight end. And Jeudy is going to get a 20+% target share as well. The thing is, like you mentioned, it's hard to put Njoku all the way up there with those Kelce, Bowers, even Ferguson, Kittle the next year, as long as Deshaun Watson's the quarterback. And we really don't know how long Watson's going to remain the quarterback. He's been not only the worst starting quarterback in the league this year, he's been arguably the worst starting QB of any quarterback through 6 weeks this century. It seems unfair to me to the rest of the players to continue to trot him out there when Winston is clearly better. I don't think Stefanski is like a complete idiot. I like, he's a former coach of the year. I think he knows that Winston's better. I think there must be some mandate from ownership, and it's just a question of how long can they stomach losing and stomach watching Watson out there before they turn to Winston. I mean, given the investment they made in him, it could be the entire season. But I do think at some point Winston should be favored to make starts, and once that happens, it's wheels up big time for Njoku and Jeudy. But in the meantime, it's kind of just going to be a bet on volume. But thankfully for Njoku and Jeudy, they should get plenty of that.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say, Brown's schedule is difficult, man. They have to play the Steelers twice. They have to play the Chiefs. They play the Ravens. You know, David Njoku showed, like, he went off against the Jets last year. A lot of these matchups are really bad for wide receivers, but they turn out to be good for tight ends, you know? And so, like, a lot of these spots, I think it'll be okay for Njoku despite a difficult on paper matchup. All right, Mark, let's go to Lions stuff here. You know, I spent a bunch of time on this with Silva yesterday. When you're really efficient and you start throwing to more guys such as Khalif Raymond and Brock Wright or whatever, you start mixing in those kind of targets, like it's good when it's concentrated and everybody's efficient. If it's really efficient and it's not concentrated, you start to run into games like one target Sam Laporta games, and you show up with Jameson Williams 3 targets in a game sometimes, and Monra 4 targets in a game. And so I get that it's scary. It's kind of starting to remind me of San Francisco a little bit, where they're so efficient and everybody can't do it every week, and it's really hard to trust those guys on a week-to-week basis. We have Laporta sadly down to 69th overall now in the rest of season, top 150. Mark, what do you think about Lions rest of season?
Yeah, I kind of think the Lions right now are either holds or potential buy lows if people are worried about the volume in this offense. You know, they just absolutely dismantled the Cowboys, and we're essentially toying with the Cowboys, giving touches to guys like Penei Sewell, Brock Wright, who could get a target, you know, every week or so. But yeah, Khalif Raymond had 5 targets in this past game. I don't think that's likely to hold moving forward. And with the Lions losing Aiden Hutchinson on the defensive side of the ball, I do think this team could turn into even a more shootout heavy team. And they play in the NFC North, which has been lauded this week, you know, as the best division in football. I expect we'll get a lot of shootouts moving forward here with the Lions. So certainly in like DFS formats, it's going to be hard to know which guy to get right every week. But if you have Amon St. Brown, Jameson Williams, you know, any of the running backs, Gibbs, Montgomery, and Laporta, like I'm confidently starting those guys every week. And if people are panicking about the potential volume, I would be willing to buy low and test the prices there. So, you know, I love investing in this Lions offense. And yeah, it might be a situation like the Niners where the touches and touchdowns are spread out wide each game, but it's certainly an offense that I want to have a piece of in fantasy. So I'm willing to test the market there.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely in season long, like starting these guys feels like a smash, right? It starts to get to the San Francisco stuff for cash where I'm like, God, can I play Debo? Can I play Ayuk? Can I play Kittle and cash? The floors gets really, really low. Like I mentioned Khalif Raymond. Tim Patrick can play, man. Mm-hmm. And Tim Patrick's out here earning targets also. And so you start spreading out even wider. You know, it's like, yeah. But season long for sure, like buying on the Lions guys. I think that's a great point on Aiden Hutchinson. Like, if this defense regresses to the point where they were so bad in 2020, 2021, even parts of 2022, you got these wild shootouts. All right, Daigle. Saints will play tomorrow night. I'm not too worried about that. I'm more thinking about Saints rest of season stuff. Derek Carr is expected back in sometime the next 2 to 3 weeks, but they are so banged up. Olave obviously will be back from the concussion. Shaheed has some knee injury. We're not sure exactly what there is there. I've been advocating to dump Alvin Kamara where you can going forward. Just don't have good vibes around this team rest of the way. Daigle, what do you think about handling Saint stuff long term?
I think you pretty much wrapped it up, is that it's all ominous. We are expecting Olave back after this short week against the Broncos, but we just don't have any more news on Shaheed, who all they've said so far is that it's a concerning injury. Don't know if that means just out on Thursday or out for the foreseeable future. And remember, Shaheed was the one who had never dipped below a 20% target share in any game. He was their wide receiver 1 through 5 weeks over Chris Olave. So something we'll keep monitoring. And I do know Bub memes popped up this past game. Maybe that's because he has the rapport from training camp, from depth reps with Spencer Rattler. Once Olave exited in the fourth quarter, it was actually Bub Means who tied Alvin Kamara with 8 targets each for the team lead. But we're still talking about jamming Bub Means in there for the rest of the season. So it's a bleak outlook right now. I think based on the news currently, if you're making a move before the weekend, it seems like Olave is actually the one to buy lower on, just because we're unclear about Shaheed.
Yes. I brought up for anyone watching on YouTube, I brought up the narratives article that our data team worked on this offseason. The narrative that backup quarterbacks are more likely to throw to backup wide receivers. True. About 2 to 3% more often. You know, that's like 1 target per game, but just shows directionally that, yes, it is true on the backup stuff, such as Bub Means and Spencer Rattler. All right. Let's keep it going here, Jack, to Tony Pollard, man. I mean, if you watch that game against the Colts, he was shot out of a cannon on some of those runs. The stuff that we saw before he was named the starter when Zeke left here. The concern, of course, is that this Titans team is absolutely awful. Tajay Spears' hamstring injury doesn't seem overly severe. We do have Tony Pollard up to 58th overall. I'm not sure it'll matter or not if Mason Rudolph, when Mason Rudolph gets in there. But yeah, Jack, what do you think about Tone P and any other Titans stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just a volume bet for Pollard. PFF had a stat that once Spears left the game in the second half, Pollard played 27 of 30 snaps. In the fourth quarter, he played every single snap for the Titans. Maybe that changes with a week to prepare and they get Julius Chestnut and or Jabari Small more involved. But still, I mean, Pollard has a 14% target share, and that's with Spears. Without him, he's going to be one of the higher target share running backs in the NFL. The next 2 weeks, the Titans play the Bills and the Lions. Those are not ideal matchups, especially from a game script perspective, given how bad the Titans are. But I mean, there's so few running backs that are in line for 15 to 20 plus targets every week. And in the short term, at least, while Spears is out, Pollard is clearly one of those running backs. And even once Spears is back, he's still the clear lead running back. And he gets volume as both a runner and a receiver. So just a volume play where you can feel pretty good plugging him into your lineup and knowing he's going to get a ton of touches.
Yeah, agreed. And the other thing that I'd say about the Titans is the DeAndre Hopkins potential of a trade before I think it's post week 9 deadline. Silva floated the Chiefs as maybe someone who could be interested in DeAndre Hopkins at the trade deadline. I still think I think he can play, and that's, would be obviously a big boost there.
One note on the Titans and Lions as well is they're past their bye, which is, I think, a good tiebreaker to make when you're evaluating rest of season decisions. So at least Tony Pollard is passes by. The Lions are as well. So I think they're easier to purchase in the season long market.
100%. And it's not like, you get 0 points if you trade for a guy who has a bye when he has his bye, right? Like people are always like, well, you're still going to get a replacement player off your bench. It's just obviously when you're trading for that asset, losing a week out of them matters. All right. Go ahead, Daigle.
The Calvin Ridley stuff also is frustrating and not coming to fruition anytime soon unless we just get a usage change altogether. 18 air yards per target this past week. He's one of only 2 players, Alec Pierce, the other one, who has a depth of target over 20 yards. They're genuinely, just like the Jaguars, sending him deep and asking him to catch inaccurate targets, which will just never result in fantasy points.
Yeah. He's whining, man. I could see him whining it in to get like some screens or something. You know what I mean? Yeah.
He's the one who picked the contract.
I know. He should just bathe in his money and stop whining. You know what I mean? Like, it's ridiculous. Okay. Colt stuff is so hard, Mark. I would love to have Josh Downs and Michael Pittman and AD Mitchell if Joe Flacco was a starter for the rest of the year. They can't do that. They use number 4 overall pick on Anthony Richardson, even if they think Joe Flacco gives them a better chance to win games, which I'm pretty confident they do. I mean, everybody does. They can't just put Flacco out there. They have to see and develop Anthony Richardson. I'm not really that excited about Downs or Pittman with Anthony Richardson back there. We had them 74th and 77th. We do have Downs ahead of Pittman, which I actually agree with. I think Downs just might be better straight up and better in fantasy, but I don't really know how to handle this in the season long market. Like, if it's going to be Anthony Richardson the rest of the way, I'm not too interested. So yeah, Mark, what do you think about Colt stuff?
It's really hard for sure, because this is probably the most stark difference between starter and backup that you can find in the NFL at this point. Anthony Richardson has played 2 full games and has averaged 24.3 pass attempts so far. Joe Flacco is at 41 pass attempts per game in his 2 full games. So it's tricky to evaluate here, and certainly the value of the receivers changes so much depending on who's quarterback. So it's certainly really hard. I don't know what the best course of action is here. I do believe in Josh Downs' talent quite a bit. He's shown to be quite good at the NFL level ever since he debuted last season. Michael Pittman is at least out there. The change of potentially going on IR to playing the following week was certainly wild. I'm not sure exactly how to feel about that situation. It feels a little fragile, and that also bakes into why we have downs ahead. I think Pittman's health is certainly a little bit of a concern here as well. But yeah, I mean, if Anthony Richardson starts, it's a boon to the running game because you have, the threat of him running the ball. So it certainly helps Jonathan Taylor's outlook a little bit. It sounds like Trey Sermon is dealing with a shoulder injury. So if Tyler Goodson is out there, I think he's an interesting pickup if Jonathan Taylor misses another week this week with his high ankle sprain. And then also kind of a dynamic there too is when Joe Flacco is in there, he's been targeting the running backs a lot more than Anthony Richardson. So it's a huge push and pull. Again, just a massive difference between starter and backup there. It's really tricky to manage in season long. If people are willing to pay like Josh Downs prices for, when he's playing with Joe Flacco, I think it's interesting to see if you could potentially sell high on him. But again, I love Josh Downs' talent. It feels painful for me to even say to potentially sell high on him. But at this point, it's kind of just holding on to these guys. And maybe we get Flacco back in there. Maybe they throw more with Richardson and his accuracy improves. But it's certainly a tricky spot.
All right. We got a question here from Waiver Wire side. He said, what do you guys think about Anthony Richardson? He still has a very high rest of season rank, but hasn't shown much. So we are at 84th overall, the QB8 on Anthony Richardson. There's very few guys at the quarterback position who can just go out and get a 30 ball just seemingly effortlessly. Even when Anthony Richardson was sucking, and I didn't think he played that well for most games last year, he still led the NFL in fantasy points per dropback, right? So I still think the upside is still really there. I like our rank on him. I understand that it's been tough so far, and he's a major risk in every single game he plays to leave the game early, which is sad to say, but he's left 4 games early in his NFL career already. So yeah, Mark, what do you think about our A-Rich rest of season rank?
I think it's at least good that they are holding him out till he's 100% healthy, because that gives me confidence that they're going to continue to run him. Because again, you've harped on this several times throughout the season, and the quote from before the season of Shane Steichen saying, we're not going to ask Steph Curry to stop shooting threes. Like they want Anthony Richardson to run. They know that adds a dynamic element to their offense. So I do think the upside is still there. Obviously, we haven't seen it yet really this season too much, but it certainly is there. And if he can stay healthy, I think the upside is there, but it's again, a wide range of outcomes.
He still has a top 5 finish in week 1. That season opener was a top 24 quarterback the next week. I think people just want more consistency, and I don't think that's going to come in Anthony Richardson's game right now. It's the same thing that's happening with Kyler Murray, is that people just want consistency for a guy they drafted as a top 8 quarterback. And although there is frustration, he has been a top 12 quarterback in 3 games, including 2 top 5 finishes. It's just a matter of, in other 3 surrounding games, the QB 18, 21, and 24. It's hard. It's hard to get these guys, even at running back, even at wide receiver, to be top 12 options weekly. So it's kind of just admitting that you're going with the ebbs and flows and chasing the weekly ceilings instead.
Yeah. I mean, people on the waiver show wanted to drop Kyler Murray for Drake May,
I know.
All right.
Everyone wants perfection, but we should not allow perfect to be the enemy of good.
Okay.
I heard that in therapy. You're welcome.
Wise.
All right. Let's go to, you know what? Let's go Daigle to the Zach Moss versus Chase Brown situation. We're up to 64 overall on Chase Brown, 101 overall on Zach Moss. As a massive best ball Chase Brown bag holder, I am excited about this. Still concerns me they don't trust him at all in pass protection whatsoever. I'm not sure that matters too much, though. This is a pretty wide gap here, Daigle, between Chase Brown and Zach Moss. How do you feel about these guys?
And still just 1 pass blocking snap in week 6, which has really been the issue for Brown. But I feel like it's something we have to lean into before we see it, because we may have already seen the changing of the guard last week. After Zach Moss fumbled on that drive to begin the 3rd quarter, from that point forward, Chase Brown out-touched him 7-0. And remember, that was a game that featured Brown fumbling on one of the last 2 drives. And then the next one, they immediately went back to him and he shot out of a cannon up the gut, ran for a 30-yard touchdown to ice the game. I think it could be coming, and although the Browns have elite talent across the board, they leak some big plays both through the air and on the ground. So if it does happen to be the changing of the guard I spoke of this week, again, it's something we need to be ahead of.
Yeah, my biggest concern on this is the schedule stuff. I mean, they got to play Steelers, Ravens, Titans, Browns twice, Broncos. Like, it's not the end of the world, and Chase Brown can still win in those spots, but it's not like a printing press. Like, we'll get to some of these teams that have absolute cake schedules the rest of the way. All right, Jack. This Giants backfield situation, Tyrone Tracy versus Devin Singletary. It's a tough one because Devin Singletary is like Brian Daboll's boy. As long as Brian Daigle is the head coach, it's hard for me to see Devin Singletary not getting at least 50% of the running back opportunities. My gut was more like 60-40 or 65-35 in favor of in favor of Devin Singletary. However, we have had beat writers, not Ronan, but other beat writers for the Giants out there talking about 80-20 in favor of Tracy. I can see it on Tracy. He's more explosive. The other way you can see it on Tracy is deep down the stretch. Daniel Jones isn't there. They're like, you know what? Let's just go to see what all these young guys have. And that would include Tracy. We've seen that plenty of times down the stretch from bad teams. So we have Singletary 98 overall, Tyrone Tracy 120 overall right now. I think for the foreseeable future, I think that's right. I think the bigger question is, what will it look like in week 15, 16, 17, if that matters to your team? That might not matter to your team. But anyways, Jack, what do you think about Giants running back room?
Well, first is the implication that if you have Devin Singletary, weeks 15, 16, and 17 don't matter to your team because you have not made it that far.
Yes, because Devin Singletary was your best player, and therefore you have not made it. You're no longer still in it in week 15, 16, and 17.
He was good. Calm down.
Well, I think Tracy's played well. I think he's forced a more even split than what we saw at the start of the year. But I don't think Singletary is Brian Daboll's guy. I think throughout his career, he's kind of just been every coach's favorite player. Like, dating back to his time in Buffalo, they consistently said, we want to get someone out there more explosive. Tried adding guys. It never really happened. In Houston last year, Dameon Pierce was coming off a good rookie season. By the end of the year, Devin Singletary had completely iced him. Throughout the offseason and training camp, the reports on Singletary were that the coaches all loved him. I kind of just think he does everything that coaches look for. And so with that in mind, it's hard for me to see Tracy completely icing him just because he's so consistent and does what coaches ask for, basically. I do think that it's going to be a pretty annoying backfield and that neither of them are going to command enough volume on a bad offense to be fantasy viable. But in general, I lean towards Singletary still being the RB1 there once he's healthy.
Yeah, and by the way, other Giants note is we are expecting Malik Neighbors back for this week, up to fifth overall among all players. In the rest of the season, top 150 is Malik Neighbors. Daigle, I want to give this stash one to you. If you could stash one player rest of season, who would it be? You know, and we're talking about backups, one injury away type stuff. I'm going to bring up the article here. Braylon, Vidal, Bucky, etc. Ray Davis. I'm sure there's some people out there, Daigle, that can only hold one of these guys. We do have one injury away. Here, for anyone who has the Draft Kit Pro, this is always being updated by Mr. Daigle with the input from the rest of our team. Daigle, what do you think about if you could only stash one of these guys right now?
You're giving away the goods, showing it on the video for free, too.
I know, but we're going to change it. They still need to buy it because it will change. It will change.
The most recent update is everyone's seeing, though, is that we did bump up Dameon Pierce and Emmanuel Wilson. Kamani Vidal was already in tier 1 before week 6. Pierce, though, was a very big winner and 3 touches in the first half to Joe Mixon's 12, and then looked great in the second half until they blew out the Patriots, and then in comes Cam Akers, who got traded, and Dario Gumbawale. I still think it's Braylon Allen. It's funny because Allen has somewhat lost like the sexiness over the last couple of games as Breece Hall has gotten more touches and the offense has struggled from the ground prior to Monday night. But if Hall were injured, it's wheels all the way effing up for Braylon Allen, who's going to get every single touch under this new regime of Jeff Ulbrich, who leaned into Breece Hall instead. So I think Allen is the one stash to have rest of season.
Yeah, agreed. One thing I was thinking since yesterday, we talked about the Garendo stuff, Daigle. I don't know if anyone hasn't had waivers yet. We're recording this Wednesday at noon. My take after thinking about it was like, not blow your first. If you had a top waiver priority, I don't think I'd blow it on Garendo. Mason sounds like he's going to be okay. McCaffrey could be back soon, and they're playing the Chiefs this week. So I don't think I'd blow my first waiver priority on Garendo, I guess, is just my lone follow-up to the waiver wire call from yesterday.
Makes sense, and I can actually go in before the Wednesday waiver guys run, and then I obviously have the change log on Saturday afternoon for everybody for Saturday night waivers. I'll add that sentence as well. I always add those little caveats for people.
Yeah. Saturday night waivers, man. This is peak virginity, but if you guys have Saturday night waivers, Daigle is updating the column for Saturday night waivers.
You might have to wait till after Texas, Georgia this week, but it'll still be in there by 7 p.m. Eastern.
All right, let's get to some of the questions from the people here as I tech lord back to the rest of season top 150. All right, let's start with this is from Abogovich. What can you do with Diontae Johnson? His value is tied to Dalton being the quarterback. Do we try to sell while we can? So one thing that Silva and I talked a little bit about yesterday, Mark, was they should get Bryce Young back in there, man. I mean, you're 1-5. You suck anyways. What is the point of seeing Andy Dalton out there every week? It makes no sense. So Evan thought that Bryce would be back in there for sure sooner rather than later. At that point, it's going to be a problem, as Abogovich notes here for Diontae Johnson, I think. What do you think about handling Diontae right now?
Well, yeah, and now there's a handful of teams that are 1-4, 1-5, that it's going to be probably a race to the bottom. So I could see the Panthers potentially pulling the rug here on Dalton and putting Bryce Young back in to help secure the potential at a number 1 pick soon. So I do think now is a decent time to sell high on Diontae Johnson. It certainly doesn't feel amazing, because since Dalton has took over, he's had a 38%, 33%, 17%, 26% target share in those games and has performed admirably. He leads the NFL in end zone targets, according to Mike Clay. So, I think it's certainly tricky to sell high on him, but I would lean that way just because the bottom could very well fall out here in the next few weeks. Again, we don't really know the exact timing on if/when Bryce Young will be put back in, but I do think it's much more likely than not to happen at some point this season. So his value is probably as high as it'll be all season right now on Diontae. He's also been banged up on the injury report the last few weeks. So, there's multiple signs, I think, pointing here to potentially selling high.
Yeah, I really like that. It's too late for me to change my one move to make, but if I could, I would steal Abogovich's here. Sell Diontae Johnson. Shout out to you. I think that's a really sharp idea on selling Diontae right now. Jack PB Murray says, what is Chris Olave's value rest of season with Derek Carr hurt? Are you selling low or holding for late season? Man, I don't know what you could get for Chris Olave at this point. He has not played well, even when Carr was in, even when the offense was like smashing. It's not like Olave was getting carried along for the ride most weeks in a big way. You could make a case he's been outplayed by Rashid Shaheed underlying and in just raw stats for much of the year. I'm worried that Olave is, I don't know, like his underlying stuff is always going to look better than his actual stats, if that makes sense. But Jack, what do you think about handling Chris Olave right now? We have him 53rd overall, down 17 spots from last week.
Yeah, I still don't think I'd be selling low right now. I mean, this is like rock bottom for Olave. He's not going to play this week. Spencer Rattler's going to start the next probably 2 games. Then we'll go from there. I honestly think, if anything, if someone has the opinion that they're willing to sell him low and take anything, I'd be looking to buy. I mean, Derek Carr is going to be back in a few weeks. Shaheed has a potentially concerning knee injury, and Olave has a pretty long track record of being a good player. So I don't really think there's any hope of him being the second round caliber player down the stretch that he was being drafted as in the preseason. But I still think you can get a guy who's maybe round 4 value. And people are probably willing to sell him pretty cheap right now.
No, I mean, we have him 53rd overall, wide receiver 29. There's just no way that that's what people think he's worth in the market right now, especially if they have a bad record. So yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. If you get him really cheap, I'd be willing to buy on Chris Olave. I mean, I think that you could get him for like 9th or 10th round value, not we have him, 5th or 6th.
And it's worth taking those chances whenever injuries may occur, similar to Tank Dell, as we talked about last week, where Slowick did get him involved. We did get a season high route participation, a season high in fantasy points, a season high target share. So even taking a chance on Olave for pennies, just in case Shaheed is out, is just opportunities you take advantage of in season long.
Yep. All right, Daigle, let's go to this Pittsburgh situation. Obviously there's a big change when you get Russ Wilson in there over Justin Fields. There are more touchdown passes available, period. There's more passing efficiency available, period. I don't think Russ is going to go in there and start smashing in any way whatsoever, but I do think George Pickens deserves a boost here if it's going to be Russ Wilson, just on the simple fact that they'll have more passing touchdowns, period. And they might have more passing attempts. They'll take fewer sacks. So Angry Moose says, how are you guys feeling about George Pickens? Lackluster start to the season from a results standpoint, but his metrics are good. Schedule looks decent, and we haven't seen Russ yet. Daigle, what do you think about Pickens' stuff going forward?
And he bounced back this past week with a team high 8 targets, was on the field for practically every route, whereas a couple weeks ago, remember, Tomlin called him out for his lazy route running. So that's really been the issue. We saw last year Russell Wilson at least supported Cortland Sutton as the wide receiver 40 in points per game. And I just don't think, well, like, Derrick Henry going to Baltimore this offseason, like Russell Wilson, the structure of the offense still doesn't change, in my opinion. This is still Arthur Smith's offense. It's still going to be run heavy and feature tight ends as well. So I'm pretty stagnant. It's not a sexy opinion, but I kind of think Pickens is just good where he is, where he'll continue to dominate targets since they really don't have a second wide receiver. We'll see down the stretch if Roman Wilson emerges since he just came back from injured reserve this past game, but no one's coming for what is Pickens' dominant opportunity right now. So I'm pretty good with Pickens where he is.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a win, and like he gets Eagles and Ravens in week 15
That's
and
good.
16 before seeing the Chiefs in week 17. I mean, those games could be games where they actually have to throw, and they have to throw a lot against defenses where you can beat them through the air, the Eagles and the Ravens. So yeah, I think Pickens is an interesting buy right now. All right, Mark, Mr. VBM says, as a Kenneth Walker manager, do I trade Braylon Allen for Zach Charbonnet? Seems simple enough, but Braylon Allen seems more like a lotto ticket or Hall to miss time. So basically what he's asking here is, should he go for the handcuff? In other words, he has Walker. Should he get Charbonnet, or should he stick with Braylon Allen and have a chance, if something happened to Breece Hall, to get both guys here? I'm not going to even put this in the trade calculator because I think it's more of a strategy question than a value question here. Any thoughts on Braylon versus Charbonnet given this setup?
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. And I have been more willing to handcuff elite running backs in situations like this, where we've seen it already with Zach Charbonnet, that if Kenneth Walker goes down, he's going to get in there and get almost every single running back touch in an offense that we love. So I think, if you're kind of just betting on one backfield, then I'd be fine flipping Braylon for Charbonnet. It does depend a little bit on your other running back positions as well. Like if you're solid in your RB2 and flex spots, I think it's an easy yes in that regard. And just as the season goes along, the potential injury cases for running backs decline. Like every week Breece Hall stays healthy, the less value that Braylon Allen has inherently. So in this case, I would probably lean yes, but again, it kind of does depend on your roster a little bit more, and just understanding the bet that you're making is, okay, I just want the Seattle running back because I know I'm getting a top 5 running back no matter what. And then if Breece Hall were to go down, you'd eat crow. But in this case, I do think it's a trade I would potentially make.
Yeah. All right. Wrapping it up here, we got 2 questions, Jack, related to Jordan Mason. The first from Kai0029 says, is it time to sell Jordan Mason? If so, what range of players should we target? And Kentucky Buckeyes says, what would you be looking to get giving up Mason and Worthy on a top 3 contender? Whenever we get multiple people submitting questions about selling a guy, I always think that his perceived value in the market is going to be lower than maybe we think, right? So I'm not sure who's buying Jordan Mason right now. Obviously, he's banged up, and there's rumors, or at least there's somewhat good rumors around Christian McCaffrey. We have Mason at 63 overall, the RB 20. I don't know, man. I'm not sure what you can get for Mason. I like selling him if you can sell him. I'm just not sure what you can get at this point. But yeah, any thoughts on Jordan Mason? And if you wanted to sell him, what kind of players would you be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have very much info on Mason's injury. It does seem like that the Niners aren't overly worried, so I lean toward him playing right now, but we'll see the injury report the next few days. But I mean, regardless, it's not like on Mason like you have some super secret info that everyone else doesn't have, that Christian McCaffrey's probably going to be back in a few weeks. So I don't really know who would be willing to trade a bunch for Jordan Mason, knowing that in 3 weeks his value is going to absolutely plummet. I kind of think if you've ridden the wave this far, you just kind of ride it out with Jordan Mason and thank him for his 8 weeks of good service, and then see what happens the rest of the way with McCaffrey's injury. But yeah, I don't think you'd be like pulling a fast one on anyone by trading Mason right now.
Yeah, it's a tough trade to make. I pulled up one here on the trade calculator, Mason and Worthy for Chase Brown and Evan Ingram. We have that as pretty fair, a little slight favorite to the Mason and Worthy side. But yeah, I'm actually optimistic on Xavier Worthy coming out of the bye. I think they need to get him more involved. I think he will be more involved coming out of the bye. We saw that with Rashee Rice last year for the Chiefs. So I don't like really giving up Xavier Worthy right now, selling low. But if you have someone willing to bowl you over and you can get rid of Jordan Mason at the same time, I think those are interesting kind of trades.
It wasn't a high one, but it was still a season high 17.6% target share for Worthy before the bye.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
I'm excited. Exactly. I'm excited for Xavier Worthy. All right. Let's go to the moment everybody's been waiting for. The one move to make ahead of week 7. Daigle, I'll give you the floor first if you're prepared for your one move to make.
I'm not sure Najee Harris will reach 100 yards at any point again this year, so it seems like a terrific time to at least shop him around for name value to your league mates and see what you can get back for him. Not only that, but quietly behind the scenes, Jaylen Warren has finished 2 games this year as healthy. And in those games, Najee Harris has only handled 55% and 58% of the team's backfield touches. So we are trying to offload him immediately. Maybe even you could get Chris Olave for him. So yes, shop around.
I love that idea. And the underlying, to Gaigle's point, like, not only was it fluky the way, not how efficient Najee was, but the underlying stuff, Jaylen Warren would played a ton, especially in pass downs. I mean, Jaylen Warren played a ton there in that game, despite coming off of the knee injury. Mark, if you are prepared, your one move to make here ahead of week 7.
Let's go with buy Trey McBride. At this point in the season, among 24 qualified tight ends, Trey McBride ranks second in targets, first in targets per route run, fifth in yards, third in yards per route run, fifth in average depth of target, but has yet to score a touchdown. I think in general, it's just good to buy players when they haven't scored a touchdown in recent weeks and sell players that have either scored 1 or 2 in recent weeks. And it looks like Marvin Harrison Jr. could potentially miss week 7 with the concussion that he suffered in week 6. The Cardinals team, which we thought could be like a spunky potential competitor, it looks like they're going to be trailing in every game moving forward. So I think buying Trey McBride now when he hasn't scored a touchdown is great. I think there's certainly a case to be made that he could be the tight end 1 the rest of the way, and I'm not sure the market is valuing him at that point right now. So I think buying on him is strong, and it might even be a buy high after he almost got 100 yards in week 6, but I'm willing to go there.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really close between Kelsey, Bowers, and McBride for tight end 1 rest of season. I guess you can throw Kittle into the mix there, but I do think Kittle is going to have more floor games than those other guys. By the way, breaking news into the show, Joey Myers back at practice here today. Just want to note that was a guy we talked about a little bit on waiver wire, and Silva and I talked about too, so I just want to follow up here. Joey Myers with the ankle, practicing on Wednesday is a really good sign. He could legit see 28% of the targets rest of season. Oh, yeah. Jacoby Myers, no problem. And so I think that's pretty notable. Okay, Jack, your one move to make.
Yeah, I mean, most of these moves require a lot of work. You got to text your league mates. You got to figure out a trade, negotiate all the details. Mine, I'm just going to say you open your fantasy app, go to the waiver wire, and add Blake Corum. I think he's available for free in most leagues. The first 4 weeks of the season, he literally played 8 offensive snaps Those 8 snaps, he got 8 carries. The Cardinals, or the Rams, were down 31 to the Cardinals, and just wanted to get out of there. In week 5, leading into the Rams bye, he played 11 snaps. Still not a lot, but he got 5 carries, including a goal line carry. And now the Rams have had their bye. It's a very well proven trend that rookies tend to get more work after their team's bye. I know Underdog Fantasy's Hayden Winks is a big proponent of that narrative. I mean, the Rams have continuously said that they want Kyren Williams to get less work. They haven't made that happen so far. I still think that Kyren is going to get the overwhelming majority of touches here, but there's got to be some chance that coming out of the bye, Sean McVay finally trusts Corum more and starts to trend toward more of even like a 70-30 split would be a big downgrade for Kyren. And then in the scenario where Kyren gets hurt, Corum clearly overtook Ronnie Rivers leading into the Rams bye. All of a sudden, you're looking at a guy who's top 20 in fantasy football if Kyren Williams misses time.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. The key thing for me on Blake Corum is if Kyren gets hurt, will Blake Corum completely ice Ronnie Rivers? I think so. I don't know for sure, but I think so. And like Jack said, I think it could be like 70-30 Corum ahead of Ronnie Rivers, something like that, or even 65-35 Corum ahead of Rivers, and that would be good enough, I think. But so Corum clearly a good 1 injury away guy. Daigle, go ahead.
And I get putting into the back of your mind that perhaps there's a little post-bye rookie bump, but I am leaning more into Corum just for the stash potential, because all we've ever done is try to bury Kyren Williams, and the dude always just sits back up and says, kick return reps don't matter, timeshare don't matter. Like all he ever does is score points.
He's a beast. All right. For my move to make this week, I am going to go to the top of the board here. I've heard some people say Breece Hall is a loser from the Davante Adams trade. They're going to throw the ball all the time. There's going to be less red zone opportunities because Davante Adams is soaking them up, blah, blah, blah. If there's people in your league, the person who has Breece Hall who thinks that, I think it's a great time to try to buy on Breece Hall. First game with Robert Saleh gone and this donkey Nathaniel Hackett no longer calling plays. Oh, shocker. Breece sets a season high across the board in usage and production. I think with Davante there, there'll be a more efficient offense. They'll be on the field more. They'll get more red zone opportunities. So I get that Davante is going to steal work in the pass game. I get that Davante is going to steal some touchdowns, but I think that's okay based on more efficiency from the offense and more touchdown opportunities. The schedule the next couple weeks isn't the easiest. Steelers this week, Patriots next week, but very soon it opens up big time. Week 10, Arizona. Week 11, Colts. Bye in week 12, then Seahawks in week 13, Dolphins, Jaguars, Rams, Bills to finish it off. So really good spot, I think, for Breece Hall here from both the usage and increased efficiency perspective. All right. That is going to do it for this week's rest of season top 150. This is always changing, as is our one and done list, as is our trade calculator. To stay up to date with it, you need to get our Draft Kit Pro. Again, just $49.99 for the entire calendar year. For Daigle, for Mark, for Jack, for producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.